Let's get something straight. The 1960s wasn't just flower power and James Bond knockoffs. It was a decade exploding with cinematic risks, some so bold, they got buried under bigger, flashier blockbusters. But here's the kicker. The movies Hollywood forgot are often the ones that pack the most punch. So, what jaw-dropping treasures have you missed while everyone else was busy quoting The Graduate? Stick around, because I'm about to rip the lid off 15 criminally underrated 60s gems you absolutely have to see. Point Blank, 1967. Hollywood loves a revenge story, but none of them hit like Point Blank. Picture this. Lee Marvin, stone-faced and ice-blooded, gets double-crossed by his own crew, left for dead, and comes back not for justice, not for love, but for one thing: his money. But don't expect a run-of-the-mill heist flick. Director John Boorman turns Los Angeles into a cold, psychedelic wasteland, where every shot feels just a little too sharp, and every silence is loaded with menace. Marvin barely speaks, but every movement, every glare, oozes a threat. He's less man, more force of nature, marching through a world that feels weirdly dreamlike, almost haunted. What makes Point Blank so underrated? It broke all the rules. There's no moral redemption, no softening of the violence. Boorman shreds traditional noir and reassembles it as something stripped down, surreal, and ruthlessly modern. The editing is jagged, the pacing unpredictable, and the color palette swings between sun-bleached and nightmarish. It's no wonder later icons like Drive and John Wick owe this film a debt. But the real twist: for all its influence, hardly anyone talks about the original. Maybe the story was too cold, maybe the style was too ahead of its time. But here's the truth. Point Blank is the revenge film that rewrote the rules and never got the credit. If you want a movie that stares back at you and dares you to flinch, start here. The Swimmer, 1968. At first glance, The Swimmer sounds almost wholesome. Burt Lancaster in swimming trunks, deciding to get home by crossing every backyard pool in his upper-class neighborhood. Sounds like summer nostalgia, right? Except, within minutes, you realize you've signed up for something a whole lot darker. Lancaster's character, Ned Merrill, isn't just hopping fences. He's unraveling at the seams. As Ned swims from pool to pool, each encounter is a step deeper into psychological quicksand. Old friends and past lovers greet him with a mixture of confusion and thinly veiled contempt. The conversations turn increasingly awkward, and Ned's shiny, confident facade starts to crack. By the time you're halfway through, you realize you're not watching a journey home. You're witnessing a total breakdown, a man clinging to the fantasy of his own life while everyone else has moved on. Director Frank Perry and uncredited Sidney Pollack gives the film a sun-drenched, dreamlike quality, turning suburban Connecticut into an eerie wonderland of denial and regret. Lancaster delivers a raw, heartbreaking performance, showing the terror that lurks beneath the surface of the American dream. There are no easy answers, no dramatic confessions, just the slow, almost surgical peeling away of everything Ned thought he was. So why did The Swimmer sink into obscurity? Maybe audiences weren't ready to see a golden age hunk brought low by delusion and heartbreak. Or maybe Hollywood just prefers happy endings. But here's the kicker. Once you see this film, you'll never look at a backyard pool or a fake smile the same way again. Blast of Silence, 1961. If you've ever wanted to take a holiday from hope, Blast of Silence is your one-way ticket. Forget every romanticized fedora-wearing noir you've seen. This is pure, unfiltered grit, shot on the freezing, rain-slicked streets of New York. The setup is deceptively simple. Frankie Bono, a hired killer, returns to the city for a job. But the moment he steps off the train, you know you're in for something different. A second-person narration hisses right in your ear, dragging you into the hitman's icy headspace. You were born in pain. You were born with hate. Alan Barron, who wrote, directed, and starred in the film, brings a claustrophobic intimacy to every frame. Frankie's world is bleak and stripped of glamour. He moves through cramped apartments, dive bars, and subway tunnels, never belonging, never at peace. The city itself becomes a cold accomplice, its neon lights reflecting off wet asphalt like a bad conscience. And the jazz score? It's not cool or smooth. It sounds like anxiety itself, jagged, relentless, throbbing in the background like a racing pulse. But what makes Blast of Silence truly unforgettable is its psychological depth. Frankie isn't some slick anti-hero. He's lonely, awkward, tormented by doubt and fleeting nostalgia. A doomed reunion with an old flame only deepens the ache. As Christmas approaches, the city grows more alien, and Frankie's fate feels carved in stone. The violence, when it comes, is ugly and abrupt. No glory, no redemption, just a final, echoing silence. The kicker: most people have never heard of this movie. Maybe because it doesn't let you root for anyone, or maybe because it's too raw, too real. But here's the truth. Blast of Silence isn't just an underrated noir. It's a punch to the gut that'll leave you feeling cold long after the credits roll. Seconds, 1966. Imagine this. You're a middle-aged businessman, trapped in a life that feels like a prison. A mysterious company offers you the chance to erase your identity, get a new face, a new name, and start again. No strings attached. Sounds like the ultimate escape fantasy, right? That's the twisted heart of Seconds, John Frankenheimer's most underrated paranoia-soaked masterpiece. Rock Hudson, in a performance that'll make you forget every romantic comedy he ever did, plays the new version of Arthur Hamilton, a man literally and metaphorically torn apart by the process of reinvention. The surgery is brutal, the recovery is lonely, and the shiny new life he's promised is anything but fulfilling. Instead of happiness, Arthur finds only deeper isolation, surrounded by other reborns who are just as desperate and hollow as he is. Frankenheimer and legendary cinematographer James Wong Howe crank up the tension with fisheye lenses, disorienting camera angles, and a relentless sense of claustrophobia. The film pulses with existential terror. What if your second chance is just another kind of cage? What if the real thing you're running from is yourself? Seconds bombed on release, dismissed as too bleak and too weird for mainstream audiences. But today, it's a cult classic that feels more relevant than ever in a world obsessed with reinvention and the fantasy of a fresh start. The ending, no spoilers here, hits like a sledgehammer. Forget plastic surgery shows and self-help gurus. If you want to see the dark side of starting over, Seconds is required viewing. Mickey 1, 1965. If you've never heard of Mickey 1, you're not alone. But this paranoid noir oddity is an absolute must for anyone who loves seeing Hollywood get weird. Directed by Arthur Penn, who'd later direct Bonnie and Clyde, and starring Warren Beatty at his nerviest, Mickey 1 is what happens when American cinema gets a little too close to the French New Wave, then adds a splash of jazz and existential dread. Beatty plays a stand-up comic on the run from the mob, or maybe just from his own mind. He bolts from club to club across a nightmarish Chicago, haunted by threats that are never fully explained. The editing is frantic. The soundtrack is all jangly jazz with Stan Getz on sax, and the cinematography is pure urban anxiety. Instead of answers, you get riddles, neon shadows, and a hero whose only real talent might be his ability to vanish. Why did Mickey 1 fall through the cracks? It was too strange, too ahead of its time, and too artsy for mainstream tastes. But it's a haunting, original slice of American paranoia, blending film noir, Kafka, and stand-up tragedy into a true 60s time capsule. If you want to see Warren Beatty before he became Hollywood royalty, raw, nervous, and a little unhinged, this is your ticket. The Bedford Incident, 1965. Tense doesn't even begin to describe the Bedford Incident. This is the kind of Cold War thriller that gets under your skin and stays there. pulsing with dread from the first frame to the last. Richard Widmark stars as a relentless U.S. Navy captain, hell-bent on hunting a Soviet submarine in the icy waters of the North Atlantic. At his side is Sidney Poitier, playing a photojournalist who soon realizes he's trapped in a floating powder keg. The film's brilliance is in its relentless escalation. There's no villain cackling with glee, no melodramatic speeches, just men locked in a high-stakes game of brinkmanship, each second ratcheting the tension higher. The submarine isn't even seen for most of the movie, but its presence looms like a silent, invisible threat. Every sonar ping, every nervous glance, is a reminder that one mistake could end everything. Director James B. Harris shoots the film in stark, unforgiving black and white, making the ship feel like a steel coffin. There's nowhere to run, no relief from the mounting paranoia. You feel every creak of the hull, every bead of sweat. The crew starts to crack under pressure, and so does the audience. When things finally go wrong, spectacularly wrong, it's less an explosion and more a gut punch. So why did the Bedford Incident fade into obscurity? Maybe it was overshadowed by glossier Cold War films, or maybe people didn't want to face the idea that real disaster can come not from evil, but from simple human stubbornness. Either way, it's a masterwork in suspense, and a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying enemies are the ones staring back at us from the mirror. The Incident, 1967. Sometimes a movie grabs you by the throat and doesn't let go. The Incident is that kind of film. Set almost entirely in a grimy New York City subway car, this overlooked thriller is a pressure cooker from start to finish. Two young punks, Martin Sheen in his film debut, and Tony Musante, board a late-night train and quickly realize they have a captive audience. An entire car of ordinary passengers, each with their own secrets, fears, and baggage. What unfolds is less a crime drama and more a psychological autopsy of an entire city's soul. Director Larry Pierce keeps the camera uncomfortably close as the tension escalates. The two hoodlums torment, intimidate, and humiliate the trapped riders, picking them off one by one, exposing vulnerabilities and igniting tempers. No hero rises to the occasion. Each passenger is paralyzed by fear, hoping someone else will make a move. Pierce isn't interested in easy catharsis. He's here to show you how easy it is for ordinary people to become powerless in the face of real, unfiltered menace. What's wild is how raw and real it all feels. The subway car becomes a stand-in for society, a place where class, race, age, and resentment all simmer under fluorescent lights. The supporting cast is a who's who of underappreciated talent, including Beau Bridges and Ruby Dee, each delivering a performance that's as honest as it is uncomfortable. Why did the incident slip through the cracks? Maybe because it refuses to offer a happy ending, or because its depiction of urban fear was a little too real for the studio crowd. But if you want to see a film that dares you to look away and makes you wonder how you'd react in the same situation, The Incident is essential viewing. Be warned, this is one subway ride you'll never forget. Pretty Poison, 1968. Forget Bonnie and Clyde. Pretty Poison is the American dream's awkward, twisted little cousin, the one you don't talk about at family gatherings. This criminally underseen thriller stars Anthony Perkins himself as Dennis, a shy, oddball ex-con just released from an institution and desperate for a fresh start. His problem? He can't stop spinning elaborate lies about himself. His even bigger problem? He meets Sue Ann, Tuesday Weld, a pretty, all-American high school cheerleader with a streak of pure sociopathy. Dennis pulls Sue Ann into his world of delusion, pretending to be a secret agent. She plays along, but soon she's running the show, taking his lies as permission to cross lines he'd never dare. The story spirals from quirky romance into black comedy, and then, before you know it, into genuine horror as Sue Ann's mask slips, and Dennis realizes he's in way over his head. Director Noel Black turned suburbia itself into a character. Bright, clean, and filled with dark corners nobody talks about. Perkins gives one of his best, most vulnerable performances. Weld is both beguiling and terrifying, a force of nature hiding in plain sight. The chemistry is electric, the suspense tight, and the ending hits like a sledgehammer. Why didn't Pretty Poison become a classic? It's too weird, too dark, and refuses to pick a side between comedy and tragedy. But in the age of true crime and dark coming-of-age stories, it feels years ahead of its time. If you want a movie that'll have you laughing, cringing, and squirming all at once, this is your new secret obsession. Just don't blame us if you start questioning the quiet ones in your own hometown. A Child is Waiting, 1963. You want bravery in filmmaking? Try tackling a subject Hollywood wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole in the early 60s. Special needs education. That's exactly what A Child is Waiting does, and it does so with a quiet power that sneaks up on you. Judy Garland, yes, that Judy Garland, plays a passionate but inexperienced teacher, Jean Hansen, who takes a job at a school for children with developmental disabilities. Her boss, played by the ever-commanding Burt Lancaster, runs the school with rigid discipline and zero room for sentimentality. What unfolds is a tug-of-war between compassion and control, between seeing the kids as patients to be managed or children to be loved. But this isn't your typical Hollywood tearjerker. Director John Cassavetes refuses to sugarcoat anything. He casts real children with disabilities, keeps the camera unflinching and intimate, and captures moments of joy, frustration, and heartbreak with documentary-like authenticity. The film doesn't deliver easy answers. Instead, it asks difficult questions. Who gets to decide what's best for these kids? Is compassion enough, or does structure matter more? Garland delivers a raw, deeply empathetic performance. Her vulnerability feels lived in, not acted. Lancaster brings authority, but with cracks of doubt beneath the surface. The drama isn't in big speeches, but in small gestures, awkward silences, and the desperate hope for connection. Why is A Child is Waiting forgotten? Maybe because audiences weren't ready for something so real, so ahead of its time. Maybe because the truth was uncomfortable. But if you want a film that challenges your assumptions and tugs at your soul without cheap tricks, this is a must-watch. It's quiet, powerful, and leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about empathy and difference. Petulia, 1968. If you think the summer of love was all flowers and groovy music, Petulia will wake you right up. This is San Francisco in 1968, but forget the haze of nostalgia. Director Richard Lester, the man behind the Beatles films, paints a portrait of a city and a generation coming apart at the seams. Julie Christie sparkles as Petulia, a beguiling, unpredictable free spirit who latches onto George C. Scott's world-weary doctor, Archie, fresh from a divorce and nursing wounds of his own. What starts as a quirky romance morphs into something far stranger and sadder. Lester uses rapid-fire editing, flashbacks, and a fractured timeline to plunge you inside the character's emotional chaos. The film jumps from past to present to possible future, often in the span of a single conversation. Petulia's wildness is both charming and heartbreaking. She's running from a loveless marriage, searching for freedom, but carrying invisible scars. Archie wants to save her, but he's drowning too. The city itself is a character, hip, chaotic, torn between old conventions and new freedoms. The scene, always teetering on the edge of darkness. The score by John Barry and cameos from Jefferson Airplane make it a time capsule. But the film's real punch is its refusal to romanticize anyone or anything. Freedom isn't easy. Love isn't magic. Sometimes, pain just is. Why didn't Petulia become a classic? Maybe it was too honest, too weird, too willing to show that happiness isn't guaranteed just because you reject the past. But today, Its fractured style and emotional rawness feel decades ahead of their time. If you want a psychedelic movie that doesn't flinch from reality, this is it. Target's 1968. Now here's a film that's way more relevant and terrifying today than anyone in 1968 could have imagined. Targets is the last great performance from horror legend Boris Karloff. But this is no monster movie. Karloff plays an aging film star who feels out of place in a world where fictional monsters have been replaced by something much scarier: real-life violence. Director Peter Bogdanovich brilliantly weaves together two stories. On one side, Karloff's Orlok, a relic from the old days, now seen as harmless, almost laughable. On the other, a clean-cut, all-American young man who loads up with rifles and ammunition, then embarks on a chilling, senseless killing spree. There's no big speech, no explanation, just a horrifying, methodical descent into violence that feels almost mundane in its normalcy. What makes Target such a gut punch is the collision of these worlds. The final confrontation takes place at a drive-in theater, as the line between horror on the screen and horror in the real world dissolves. The film is lean, unsparing, and eerily prophetic, a commentary on America's growing obsession with guns, and the terrifying truth that sometimes the most monstrous things are hiding in plain sight. Why is this film forgotten? Maybe because it hits too close to home. Maybe because it's too honest about the world we live in, then and now. But Karloff's bittersweet performance, the razor-sharp direction, and the way the story lingers long after it's over make Target's essential viewing for anyone who wants to understand where old Hollywood ended and the modern world began. Failsafe, 1964. Let's get one thing straight. Failsafe is not your dad's Cold War movie. If you think nuclear paranoia in the 60s was all winking satire and black comedy, this film will knock the smile right off your face. Directed by Sidney Lumet and starring a never-better Henry Fonda, Failsafe is an anxiety attack stretched to feature length, filmed in stark black and white, that makes everything feel even more claustrophobic and inevitable. Here's the nightmare. One tiny technical glitch, just a misread code, and American bombers are headed straight for Moscow. There's no way to call them back. As the Pentagon and the White House scramble, every second is a slow-motion gut punch. Fonda's president is faced with impossible choices: negotiate, sacrifice millions, or watch the world burn. The tension builds until it's almost unbearable, with tight close-ups, no musical score, just the ticking of clocks and the rising panic in everyone's voices. Why did Failsafe get overshadowed? Bad timing, pure and simple. Released the same year as Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. Strangelove? It was just too real, too bleak, and way too soon. But here's the kicker. Watch it now, and it's even more terrifying. Precisely because there are no jokes, no relief, just the sense that one mistake could end everything. No Hollywood heroics, no easy answers, just a chilling warning that still echoes. If you want a film that'll leave your nerves shredded and your mind racing, Failsafe is an absolute must. Charlie Veric, 1969. Okay, let's finish strong with a film that proves sometimes the smartest guy in the room isn't the toughest or the flashiest. He's just the one who refuses to play by anyone's rules. Charlie Veric flies under almost everyone's radar, but once you've seen it, you won't forget it. Walter Matthau stars as Charlie, a small-time crop duster who masterminds a low-key bank heist that suddenly spirals into a cat-and-mouse chase, with both the mob and the law hot on his trail. What sets this one apart? It's the anti-glam heist movie. Matthau plays Charlie as an everyman, cautious, practical, almost invisible, not your typical screen outlaw. The fun is in the details. Instead of big guns and wild shootouts, Charlie uses his wits, blends into the background, and keeps everyone guessing, including the audience. Director Don Siegel, the guy behind Dirty Harry, keeps the tension cranked with tight pacing, dry humor, and a parade of double crosses. The supporting cast is a who's who of classic character actors, with Joe Don Baker as a brutal mob enforcer and Sherry North as a hard-bitten love interest. The chase sequences are pure 60s adrenaline, but the real kick is in watching Matthau outsmart everyone. No cape, no gadgets, just brains and grit. Why is Charlie Veric so overlooked? Maybe because it doesn't fit the usual heist movie formula, or because Matthau's understated genius gets overshadowed by louder legends. But trust me, this is a smart, tough, totally underrated ride through the dusty corners of American crime cinema. Next time someone claims they've seen every great 60s thriller, hit them with this one. They won't see it coming. The Shooting, 1966. Most westerns are about big vistas, quick draws, and classic good versus evil showdowns. The Shooting is about none of that, and that's what makes it unforgettable. Directed by Monty Hellman and starring a young Jack Nicholson, this low-budget cult classic feels more like a surreal fever dream than a typical horse opera. The setup is deliciously simple. A mysterious woman, Millie Perkins, hires two cowboys, Warren Oates and Will Hutchins, to track someone across a desolate landscape, with Nicholson playing a deadly, black-gloved gunslinger on their trail. But as the group rides deeper into the wilderness, things get weirder, tenser, and far more existential. The desert isn't just empty. It's loaded with secrets, suspicion, and a sense that something's very, very wrong. Hellman turns the Western into a slow-burn psychological puzzle. Dialogues are cryptic, the atmosphere is suffocating, and the sense of dread grows with every mile. By the final, shocking twist, you realize you've been watching a genre-busting meditation on fate, guilt, and violence, decades ahead of its time. Why is The Shooting forgotten? Easy. It broke all the rules, barely got released, and was too weird for the John Wayne crowd. But its minimalist style and existential vibes make it a huge influence on everyone from Quentin Tarantino to the Coen brothers. If you think you know Westerns, this one will change your mind, and maybe haunt your dreams. Wild in the Streets, 1968. You think youth culture is wild now? Strap in. Wild in the Streets is a wild ride through an America that's lost its mind, and somehow, it still feels prophetic. This outrageous satire starts with Max Frost, Christopher Jones, a 24-year-old rock star who gets swept up in the counterculture tidal wave of the late 60s. Before you know it, he's leading a youth revolution that votes to lower the voting age to 14, takes over Congress, and sends anyone over 35 to psychedelic re-education camps. It's equal parts dark comedy, political cautionary tale, and pure B-movie anarchy. The world of Wild in the Streets is all about extremes, trippy visuals, pounding rock music, and a plot that goes so far over the top, it becomes a gleeful act of cinematic rebellion. Shelley Winters and Hal Holbrook play the nervous adults trying and failing to stem the tide. But there's no stopping Max and his army of teen zealots. Director Barry Shear loads every scene with psychedelic colors, sharp satire, and a relentless pace. There are moments that border on the ridiculous, but that's the point. This is the 60s imagined as a runaway carnival, and it dares you not to take it seriously, even as it sneaks in biting commentary about power, age, and the dangers of giving anyone, even the youth, absolute control. Why is Wild in the Streets forgotten? It's so loud, so weird, and so deeply tied to its era that it scared off the mainstream. But dig a little deeper, and you'll see just how smart and eerily accurate it is about America's endless appetite for revolution. If you want a film that's part fever dream, part social critique, and 100% unhinged, Wild in the Streets is your ticket. Take it for a spin, but don't expect to come back the same. So there you have it, 15 forgotten 60s films that never got their due, but might just blow your mind. Some are bleak, some are beautiful. All of them are proof that cinematic treasures hide in plain sight, waiting for someone curious enough to dig deeper. Which one are you going to watch first? Or have you seen one nobody else remembers? Drop your pick in the comments, hit subscribe for more deep dives, and ring the bell. The next great discovery could be just a play button away.